Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conceptualism. I'm very happy today to have with me Rashaan Allwood, who is a virtuoso organist, pianist, and harpsichordist, and composer as well. And it's so great to have you here with us, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really looking forward to getting the discussion going.
Yeah. So, I was listening to in preparation for this podcast, I was listening to your performance at Maison Symphonique, the Jacqueline Desmarais prize. I think you won that. You came first. And so I was listening to your performance and it was absolutely remarkable. And then, in the middle of the performance, I started laughing. You know why I started laughing? Because I saw those trumpets like just moving on their own, hydraulic, just like
Yeah.
so that was so cool. And like it was almost like it was almost like I was watching like a movie, and it's kind of like a noir movie, and it's like everything is so serious, and then suddenly, like, you have these trumpets just coming out. It's like,
Yeah. It was super amazing. Yeah, the organ has these trumpets, yeah, that you can control, these horizontal chamades that come out of the wall. The wall opens up and it's such a dramatic effect. They told me sometimes for the concerts they even put a spotlight on it. But like just to make it come out. But the thing was planning that performance was finding the moment in the piece theatrically, where I wanted those trumpets to come in and out. It was like, what was the time for that to happen? Like, yes, of course it adds to the volume, but it was almost more, not more, but as theatrical as it was for sound. And like when they went back in, like in the second movement, like everything was planned to try and bring some intensity to the moment, the theatrical elements.
total. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, and so I mean, you are performing a lot of modern work, and you're also composing your own pieces. I think I saw that you won a commission from the American Guild of Organists to do a composition.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
so
true. Yeah.
congratulations. And do you have what are the plans, like, preliminarily speaking? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, what I wanted to do was to have the actual speaking voice of the organist integrated into an organ piece. There are many different ways we can look at it, like many different goals I had. So that was one goal, was to, because you remember the organ was originally invented to be the voice, the singing voice, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So that was its purpose. So now I wanted to integrate, we're in the time of modern music, and since Schoenberg and even other people like Sibelius from that era were using the spoken voice. Mendelssohn even has pieces with narration. So compose, and that's just old music, like
Mm.
no need to mention Lachenmann and Stockhausen and all those composers who use a lot of the spoken voice effects. So I wanted to explore how the organ could also start to approach spoken voice effects. So that was one of my goals. And the way I'm doing that is by addressing another one of my goals, which was like an almost social issue goal. And that was to allow the performers to address something that's personal and relevant to them the day they do that performance, no matter when that performance is, for the rest of time. And the way that they're able to do that is that I'm going to have the names of someone who they feel, in, it's kind of, pretty 2020, but someone who they feel is oppressed, or maybe 2016, I don't know. But I want them to choose a name or a place or a group or anything that they feel is oppressed, and have moments in the piece where they recite it. And then that is going to be coordinated to the musical events, which brings us to another goal of this piece, which was to bring out improvisational skills in performers. And that's something I've been working a lot in composition these days, is encouraging performers to get into improvisation and how to do that. And the way I thought to do that is to write pieces that encourages them to do that. Like, and I was influenced to do this by Stockhausen, who has pieces called intuitive music, where he would just write like a sentence, like, play music as golden as the sun. That's not exactly the words, but something like that. And
Right.
they would just have them play. But I wanted to change that a little bit and give them some parameters to work with. Maybe it's also because of my background in jazz, but just giving them enough parameters so there's freedom, but there's also the sound result I want. And I've been
Right.
working on that with a couple of pieces, and it's writing certain musical cues, but specific events. Like there's a lot to, like, I'm writing a saxophone quartet now, and it's like I tell the baritone to play a note, and then I say the tenor plays a note, and you guys just alternate back and forth, and they're staccato. And the way that's going to sound is like da 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 da, and they're just improvising it. They're making it, and they're doing this improv, which they've never done because they've only played, whatever music it is that they've played, classical music.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're improvising this like very complex rhythm. If you were to notate that out and what exactly they were doing, you know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to do, is create those type of parameters for the organist in this piece that will match with their voice and that will also have relevance to whenever they do it. I have to talk to the committee. I'm also thinking of the possibility of including electronic effects on the voice so that I can blend even better with the organ, like some sort of synthesized effects. But I haven't talked to the committee yet about that one. But it's an open process, and they're really great about saying get in touch and plan your commission with them. So it's been really great working with the AGO there. Definitely.
That's great, man. That's so cool. Like, yeah, like it could totally be like organ and vocoder with electronics.
Exactly. There's a lot you can do for sure.
And I mean, this kind of like abstraction, or like writing these weird little prompts and using that as a score. Like, I mean, Brian Eno came up with oblique strategies, and I don't know if you're familiar with Brian Eno or oblique strategies, but they're basically a set of cards, which have all these bizarre instructions on them, like tape your mouth, go outside. It's not a wall, it's a brick, reverse, water, all kinds of weird stuff. And, when you're in a block, when you're in like an artistic or whatever, in a block, basically, then you pull out one of these cards and you follow the instructions faithfully. And some really weird and interesting music has come out of that, because he sort of sees it as almost a production tool, like he almost uses the cards as like a producer, where, the producer will say this cryptic and random thing that's, I don't know, taped to your amp. And then suddenly, and then it's like, and the whole dynamic shifts, and like suddenly like everybody is playing like in this really interesting way. Mm-hmm. And what you said there about like the improvisation, where the two people are trading those notes back and forth, it probably almost sounds like drumming, like polyrhythmic drumming, because of that staccato. Right. You're talking about like the rhythm. Like that's right. So cool. Because how the hell are you going to notate an improvised polyrhythmic drum solo? Like it's impossible. Right. It's like you would never be able to like catch that feel. Even if you successfully notated it, there's like certain pauses and certain like intuitive things that you just feel that you cannot write down.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it's really great to explore with those types of almost simple instructions that will create such a dynamic effect. Yeah. But to be fair, as I get further in the piece, the instructions do get in some ways more complex, but it's just because then you start to realize how much you can design a sound world with giving like 4 saxophones different improv instructions that they're relating to each other, how much they have to listen to each other and react, like there's so many things. You just tell them. It was beautiful. I had 2 of them playing that staccato thing with some various notes now. And then I had 2 of them sustain notes. I gave them like 2 different modes. And I said, choose one note from this mode and sustain it, any note. And with a dynamic shape of hairpins, right? And so all of a sudden you get this dot, 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 and then the 2 saxophones in the middle, they just come in whenever they want. It's like right in between those 2 moments, and they sustain this unknown harmony to them until they hear it. And, it's always going to be something. It's going to be a 9th. It's going to be a 3rd. It's going to be it's always going to be a cool interval, because what's a non-cool interval? And so then they sustain
a minor second.
Exactly. Hey, but that would create such an interesting buzz, especially between the 2 saxophones, Yeah. So no matter what you get, you're going to get this really cool sound. And they're doing this dynamic shape in this new harmony they didn't know they were going to do, and all these, and that's still even only the 2nd page. So like at the 10th page, it gets crazy, but there's so much you can do like with that kind of idea and creating these really dynamic atmospheres. And the performers, I think, have fun with it, but I'm meeting with them more in the 2nd semester. And that'll be, they'll see the entire piece at that time, and we'll see if they're still so excited about it when they see how complex it gets. But we'll work on it together, And
I'm sure they will be. I mean, like that's the thing too. Like when people see the sketches and they're already excited, you know, it's like you know, they're gonna love the final product. I'm sure they will.
right, right. Well, we hope so. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward. I don't know if I mentioned that I'm doing my PhD at um, Western University in London, Ontario, for composition. I don't know
amazing.
if I mentioned that. So yeah, it's really amazing, the program here. I was so happy that right away they force us in the greatest way possible to work with a chamber ensemble. Every composition major is forced to write a piece 6 to 8 minutes for a chamber group. So that's how I ended up with the saxophone quartet, and I'm so happy. You know, I don't remember seeing that in some of the other programs, music programs I've seen. You know, because sometimes the programs are so isolated. You have the performance
Mm.
majors. They have to do their Beethoven sonata. They don't have time to learn your random composition. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of the vibe in a lot of universities. But here it was really amazing that, you know, everybody has to make time and learn some composer's piece if they are in a chamber class, which is just really nice.
That's amazing. No, that sounds great. And like you studied at McGill, right? You studied with Hans Ola
Yes, yeah,
Eriksson.
the man, the legend.
He was. I actually I had him on the show. I interviewed him in a previous episode.
That's great. Yeah, that must have been amazing. I'll definitely have to go check that out because yeah, he had a really big influence on my playing for sure. And, you know, he's a great mentor to
Mm,
this day, you know,
mm.
so really great guy.
Yeah, we talked about the ice organ that he helped design. Don't know if you
Right.
know about this, but like he actually helped design a two-stop ice organ that was like literally made out of ice. The pipes are made out of ice.
Wow. That's really cool. Must make some, what does it sound like?
Yeah,
Do you,
it's really interesting because like, you know, obviously the ice is like slowly melting, so like the pitch keeps shifting, you know, it's like
that's ridiculous. Wow. That's unbelievable. I didn't even conceive that. I thought they were gonna like keep it in a freezer or something so it'd be steady, but to think about the pitch shifting as the ice melts, that's
they basically put it in a giant igloo. And you know, because like why not? You're building an ice organ. Where else would you put it? You know, and
right.
but the thing was when people started coming in, right? Like the temperature in the igloo started rising, so the organ
Right.
started melting. So I think the BBC and you know all these like big broadcasting people had come with their cameras and mics and stuff to record this,
Right.
and then the maker of the organ basically kicked them all out. He's like, no, you can't be here.
Right. Yeah, it's gonna be done. Yeah, it's just gonna melt it to the ground. If you're shining all those lights on it for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, come on, who does it surprise that Hans Ola was, you know, was part of that kind of project? And then of course, like he was also there, you know, for the John Cage project, As Slow as Possible, you know, the 639-year organ piece.
Right.
He was one of the people on the committee there, like when they you know decided to do this project. So it's really interesting because like you know, like he's such a daring and experimental thinker, you know.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's amazing. And I also see you in the same way. Like, I mean, I know you're a classical musician. You've had a very classical education. And for my audience that maybe may not know this, you actually you got 100% on your diploma, on your ACRT diploma,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, and the
your piano exam.
yeah,
Rated.
the highest exam in the Royal Conservatory at the time. I think now they might have added some new ones, but in my day, that was the highest one. Yeah, in 2012 or so. Yeah, so I did my bachelor in piano at U of T,
Right.
in organ, and now composition. So hopping around.
No, but it's great. I mean, it's so great that you know that you're taking this very classical education and you're doing really like you know experimental things with it. I mean, to me, like classical music is experimental by its very nature. But unfortunately, in the 21st century and even in the late 20th century, it's sort of become too institutionalized, maybe too codified. Like people expect certain things out of a classical musician, whatever that even means. You know.
Right, right. Yeah. Whatever that even means is right. Because honestly, I get so deep in the composer world that it just when you see it, it's like everyone there are people experiment. There are also people not experimenting, right? Like you say, oh,
Yes.
there's a large amount of people, maybe the large population not experimenting. But when you're really in that little corner and you're only seeing those other like 7 composers who are doing it, you really feel like you're just on, like, you're on it. Like you just feel like the world's moving forward still, you know? Because yeah, there are people who are doing some crazy things like you, you know, like really revolutionary, interesting things. And when you look at, you know, when you're around those types of people, it just helps you keep going, you know, motivates you.
I think you're right. I think you're right. You're the circle of people that, that are in your space, I think that really matters. You're right. Because you know, those are the people that, you have the difficult conversations with. Those are the people that you kind of look to for cues, okay, I want to do this. And like, you just sort of look at, okay, has it been done before? And for me, building your own instrument and spending that kind of money to to fulfill your vision. I mean, the fact that Cameron Carpenter has actually gone out and done something like that and has succeeded, I mean, that's massive. Like, that's huge, I obviously, to me, that's wow. And he's one of my heroes. And then a while ago, on one of his posts on Instagram, I write, I'm having a custom built instrument, by M&O, and he starts following me on Instagram. Man, I lost my shit. I was like, holy crap, Cameron Carpenter's following me on Instagram.
Yeah, Cameron, yeah, he's an amazing guy. Like, personally, he really he says it, I think, straight up on his profile. He's like,
I support young organists and musicians. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And old ones too, really. I feel like he supports anybody who's passionate about music, you know? He's out there for you, which is, it's amazing to see a guy who's like that. I didn't even know there were people. I thought every famous person out there their Instagram profile was like a bot or something. You know, it's nice to know that there's some people out there who actually respond, and he'll share people's posts and he'll message people and stuff. He's really great for just the way he's active on Instagram, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you're right. Like that interaction, where you're almost, I mean, it's like, you're right. A lot of famous people, especially I don't know, if you have like 1 million plus followers on Instagram, I mean, can you imagine how many notifications you get every day? You basically, you just turn it all off. It's like, you just can't do that. I mean, you'd be spending 24/7 on Instagram or whatever platform, and you'd never be able to keep up,
Mm-hmm.
So you have to hire an assistant, you have to hire all these people, whatever. But it's actually remarkable that there are people like Cameron that are actually willing to invest their time in supporting people and to state it so plainly that they are supporting young musicians, and that they're interested, they're invested in you being successful. I mean, because they don't have to do that, right? They don't. That's not part of that's. They don't get paid anything to do that. That's coming from them genuinely. Like that's like from their heart.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He's a great guy.
Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to ask you about Jean Desmarais. He was, I believe, one of the adjudicators, right?
At the OSM competition?
No, I actually thought, from what I read, I thought he was an adjudicator at the at your diploma exam. But
no,
I may be wrong. Anyway, he made a comment. I don't know if he was an adjudicator or not, but he made a comment. He said, you played, I forget what the composer was. He said, you played the composer in such a way that I didn't even know it was possible, but you convinced me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just a testament to my compositional heart that I had even back then, which was just, trying to make things your own.
Yes.
As the foremost goal. The foremost goal was to make it your own before it was make this so people will like it. Even though that's very important, even you can never throw that away. Nobody throws that away, Even if we think Stockhausen and Schoenberg threw it away, they don't. Schoenberg didn't write a single piece that he didn't think people would find beautiful. That was the goal. And when you get to know his music, you see it. You see it, and it's different. Webern, it's not supposed to make you it can make you uncomfortable, but it's still beautiful. It's always like lyrical lines. It's always shapes, contours that are just so artistic, And when you clue into that, the music changes. I don't even remember how I got there. Oh, the performance aspect, yeah. And so I think the same thing happens when I try and interpret works a lot of the times. Is I don't come at it from the perspective of trying to sound a certain way. I come from the perspective of what do I think of this piece and how am I going to portray that? And I think what happens is sometimes I play things that are different than other people would play it. And that's why he probably makes that comment that didn't know he would like it like that, because, you know, hopefully it was a different way and it was my own kind of piano's always kind of been my first true love. And when you talk about building instruments, I have to clue you in on a instrument that I am dreaming of building, but have none of the means, but it's still a dream. And I've been composing a lot of extended techniques pieces in the piano, especially involving harmonics and just really being able to get all the different harmonics on a string.
Yeah.
And just do that in your harmonic language, right? And I should show you some of my pieces because I have a piece online where I do a lot of that harmonics in the piano. And to be honest, it's a spliced recording, so all the harmonics are perfect, which I have never done in a real performance, nailing all of those harmonics. But in that spliced recording, I actually get them. And anyways, what I want to have designed is, first of all, a straight strung piano, which is what Barenboim, I think there's a Barenboim Steinway that he designed to have the same straight stringing as Beethoven and Schubert's pianos, so that the lower end would be more clear. So when Beethoven and Schubert are writing these thick, low, dense chords in the bottom of the keyboard, if it's straight strung, it's going to allow that to resonate a little bit more clearly. When the strings are crossed, then those bass resonances are going to allow these strings to vibrate, which is why, you know, Chopin Rachmaninoff has so rich in the tone, because all these synthetic vibrations.
Right.
But Beethoven and Schubert want that cleaner, straight strung, not crossed, so that you get that kind of organized sound. So that's step one. But the reason why I want that is because I want access to the harmonics of every string. Right. Because when you cross, you lose a lot. And it's really unfortunate, because if you think about how many harmonics are on a guitar, right? And how many are on a violin, right? That's 4, that's 6 strings. There's so many strings on a piano. Right?
Exactly.
It's more than 88. Yeah. There's so many strings on a piano.
Because most of the top end is 3 strings, and then it's 2 strings, and then it's 1 string. So right, exactly. I mean, it's probably at least 500 strings, maybe more.
Exactly. And so, and they all have a full harmonic spectrum of harmonics.
Yes.
Complete, like, beautiful, rich. The tone of a piano harmonic is just like, it's like out of a movie. It's so incredible.
It is.
The way that it sounds.
It's almost surreal how beautiful it is.
Yeah, I know. And it's like not that exposed. So the reason why I want that straight strung is to get harmonics. Now, this is the part where the piano gets interesting, is on the soundboard, I want markings that show all the like exactly where every harmonic is on every string.
That's so
or
cool.
Or at least the main ones, some of the main ones.
Yeah.
Just some of the key ones.
Right.
Just so that you can have that, because, you know, a violinist and a guitarist, they can kind of keep track of it because they only have those kind of 4 strings. Yeah. But when every string has a different space in exactly where that harmonic is, you know? Yeah. And so it would be helpful if there was some sort of contour, just to give an idea, like that's where the 5th partial is, that's 4th partial. Yes. You know, throw in the 9ths and the 7ths and all that. And then you're living the dream.
That would be incredible, man. I think that's incredible. And have you thought about like having some sort of mechanism where you would, like, you know how you're able to play all the keys, you know, maybe you could have some sort of way of isolating those harmonics, so you could rearrange the harmonic structure of the piano by like having like almost a mixer, like a fader, and like each place like on the string would have like a, you know, like a artificial way of pinching the harmonic, you know what I'm saying? And then you had that at all the levels for each string. Dude, that would be like the weirdest, most complex piano ever, but like it would probably take a lifetime to learn how to play that instrument. But like that would change the piano performance like world forever. Because like the way that you think about the piano is like as such a, you know, like it's one color. But can you imagine a piano that has access to all these harmonics? Suddenly it would be like having, I don't know, 500 stops on a pipe organ. You know, exactly. It's like each string would have its own color. It would have, you know, you could totally it'd be like having all the mixtures and all the mutations, and you could basically do anything that you want. Like, can
Hmm.
you imagine that piano? Like, it would be beyond, like, it would, I don't know. I don't even know if you could call it a piano anymore. It would have to be like it would be a new family of instrument.
I know exactly. Yeah, it's just really about designing a piano that's going to be ideal for extended techniques in general too. So also making sure there aren't any like giant bars in the way, because different
Mm.
pianos have different like little
Yeah.
things inside there for the stability of the instrument. But
Yes.
just like probably strategically planning those so that there's more access to brushing the strings and
Yeah.
both sides of the hammer and all those
Yeah.
kinds of like that way vertically. But yeah, there's so much you can think about in terms of getting a rich like a rich amount, a rich quantity of extended techniques available, and
Yeah.
just having that as something standardized. And then the harmonics thing is just like also one of those, probably the most important, most complex
Yeah.
uh, one to design. But that's kind of my dream piano that I want to have before I die, so that I can actually play those harmonics easily. Because I know some people mark it with chalk, like where they are going to put the harmonic.
Right.
But my piece has so many harmonics, and I was also realizing if you have a piece that has a lot of harmonics that are all
Mm.
like meticulous, you start to get a sense of where they are. Just
Yeah.
like how far to jump for an octave, or how a
Yes.
player knows how to play strings. So you can just like you get a sense of where the harmonics are.
Right.
So I don't really, even though I'm talking about the line, but I don't think it needs like chalk. When I'm now in the early phases, for me at least, I'm trying to learn how to do it by just understanding where it is.
Right.
But in my ideal future piano, I will have it marked underneath. But still, like it's just, but you'll eventually ignore those. Like a guitarist doesn't look at all
Yes.
the frets. They
No, of
know,
course not.
you know
Yeah.
it's there.
But like for a new performer of your work, like that guide would be so helpful. And
It makes it
especially
feasible. Yeah.
and like I mean I'm partially colorblind, but I mean I'm sure like you've thought about like having some sort of color coded system where like this level of markers in this color refers to this harmonic or this
Right.
partial, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's so much. Yeah, that's going to be an exciting project when that day comes.
That's amazing, man. I think that's incredible. I think that's a really cool project. Um, and do you? I mean, I know this is a very cliched question, so you can like punch me in the face for asking. But do you have a favorite piano maker?
Oh, favorite piano maker. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I've explored enough pianos, especially now with my new perspective with extended techniques and
Yeah,
stuff. In order for me to really give an honest statement, I'd have to have like all the pianos in front of me, all different manufacturers, like see how the spacing is, see how, but be the same for the action, see how the touches.
that's right.
And I haven't really had that experience. My experiences have been like go to a hall, there's a really nice Steinway, it sounds beautiful. Go to another hall, there's a really nice Yamaha, it sounds beautiful. It's pretty much it. I don't even think I've played a Bostendorfer or a Fazioli. I haven't played enough of the difference between the Hamburg and the New York Steinways. Like,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
so many different things.
yeah.
So again, hopefully one day if I get this piano built, I'll have that opportunity to see all the different companies and just trying to understand, which is going to be the best framework to start
Yes,
from. But
yeah.
what about you? Do you have a favorite builder?
Well, I've been lucky. I've been able to play Faziolis and Busendorfers and just all kinds of weird pianos, um,
Mhm.
and like really experimental pianos too. And like I would say that my favorite piano doesn't exist because I actually want to have it built.
Nice.
Just like a guitar player, right? Like, I mean, you can play Fender, you can play Gibson, but like at the end of the day, like most guitarists at some point in their life will want a guitar built for them according to their specifications by a luthier, because it's like, and most pianists never have that luxury. Most pianists never even think about that. They're not like, I want to have an instrument built for myself, which is what you're thinking about, right?
Right.
Most pianists will just accept the instrument for the way that it is because it's too expensive to go set about, I don't know, making your own piano. Like who
Right.
who has the time and the money to do that? But
Yeah,
like
exactly.
but I'm a crazy like obsessed musician who wants all this crazy gear, and like I'm willing to go to like the end of the universe and back to get it. But like
Right.
but I can see how like your average musician is like, this is a piano, they accept it. It's like The piano is the piano. There's like, they're not thinking, okay, what can I do? What more is there? Because
Right.
like, for example, when John Cage, did his whole prepared piano thing, it's because he didn't have access to all the percussion instruments that he was using. So it was actually the reason that the prepared piano even came into existence was because he was trying to solve a problem. And so in that way, like, necessity is the mother of invention. And it's like, as a musician, as a composer, the reason you're thinking about building this piano is because of your own compositions, right?
Right.
It's not like you need a piano like that. It's for any other reason except that you want it, and it's like something in
Right.
your mind, and so then you
Right.
want to realize it. And I think all the instruments that have ever been built were built because of that. When people imagined it, they were like what could happen if I did this, and
Mhm.
so like the Busendorfers, they have extra keys, I think they have 98 keys instead of 88,
Right. Yeah. A
you
couple
know
on the low end,
exactly.
triple back or something. So
Exactly. And there's a piano that was built that has two keyboards, like
oh,
two manuals. So you could play, I mean, for the music of Bach and some of the repeated, like, repeat it where you want to play a note really, really fast and repeat it. I mean, unless you're
right.
Martha Argerich, you need two, you need to,
Right. Right. Right.
you need two
Yeah.
keyboards, right? Because like, if
Yeah.
you want to go really, really fast, there's only so much you can do with one hand on a keyboard.
Mhm.
And then of course, there's pianos with the pedal board. There's there and so I mean, I think in modern times, like, people have been rethinking what the piano is and what it can do. So
Mhm.
I think your instrument will be welcome. That's basically what I'm leading to. That's what I'm
Right.
getting to. Is that I think your
Mhm.
instrument will be welcomed. Uh, you
Right.
know,
Yeah,
People,
there's a lot, even as you were talking there, I was thinking like, is there a microtonal acoustic piano?
there is.
Probably.
There is. There's somebody that's made it. Yeah, there's like, you can move, you can modulate. You actually look this up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like there is a piano that exists that can do that, and you can actually
Wow.
change the pitch of the string while you're playing it.
That's cool. That's cool. I gotta combine that with my straight strings and my harmonics. But I
Yeah,
guess the harmonics will change, well, if you change the length of the string, or I
that's
don't know,
right.
or yeah. So that sounds like a really interesting instrument. I'll have to check that out. Microtonal acoustic piano. Yeah.
Yeah, you can play ragas on it.
Oh yeah. Wow. That's heavy. Yeah. That's super cool. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And just be really in tune with the people, like actually be playing the raga, like you say. Yeah. That's awesome.
So I'm sure you're inspired by music from other parts of the world. So what are the, and I hate the term world music, but what are the world music traditions that you sort of draw from, or like that you're inspired by?
I have to think hard about that one, and there's so many answers I could give, but sometimes I feel like, even for me personally, like, what is world music? It's like, it's such
I
a
know.
confusing question, because it's like, my parents are Jamaican. If
Yeah.
I study Stockhausen, that sounds like world music to me, because it's like some random guy in Germany.
Man, I love that. Dude, that is so cool. Like, dude, mind blown right now. No, but that's so cool. You're so right, man. Like for us, Western music is world music, and people are like,
Exactly. Yeah, there's so much, but my parents, there's a lot of cultural music. My grandparents on both sides of my family were musicians, like folk musicians in Jamaica.
yeah,
So on my mom's side, they come more from the Indian side tradition, but they were still born in Jamaica, but they're from the Indian Jamaican kind
uh-huh,
of thing. A lot of Indians came to Jamaica as workers. A lot of Asians in general, or even a couple like Chinese people you'll see who have Jamaican accents, because there are a couple Asians and a lot of Indians came over to Jamaica as
right,
indentured as workers. And so my grandpa was is a folk musician. He has all these like really, like, it's like indigenous style instruments, and I don't even, like, my mom would know better, but it's like this kind of folk tradition that's kind of Indian Jamaican. And whenever down in Jamaica, they're all kind of playing together and doing all these songs, and the guy breaks out like whatever ghetto drum he has, and I don't want to call it ghetto, like they're it's just they're kind of,
yeah,
I don't know what the right term is for it, but
yeah.
these instruments that are like almost homemade,
Homemade,
like
yeah,
these
homemade instruments, yeah, yeah, homemade or DIY instruments, yeah, exactly.
exact. So yeah, they're there's that kind of rich musical kind of just, they want to be playing, they want to be making music all the time. And on my dad's side of the family, it's the same thing. Like my dad plays guitar a little bit and sings a little bit, and his mom sings a lot, and it's like they're passionate for music, you know?
Yeah.
And so like when I think of world music, I just think like honestly for me now that I'm so deep in music, there's not a single piece of music I don't like. I can say that now. In terms of an aesthetic, I don't
Yeah.
want to say, but even in terms of like a composition, because everybody's on their own thing and everybody's going to write something that's representative of them. And, you know,
Yes.
there's nothing, it's never going to be bad. It's just going to be them.
So let
So,
me then that's beautiful. I'm so happy that you said that, you know. But now I'm gonna bring in the fact that as musicians, as composers, whatever, we are judged by objective standards that other people have decided to critique our music. Like being a judge on a musical competition, or or deciding how to score someone's exam. I mean, like, they liked it, but like, I mean, obviously you got 100, like that's incredible. But now imagine you had like other adjudicators who thought that the fact that you took all these, liberties with interpretation was, I don't know, like not to their taste, and suddenly like you got a 50 out of 100,
right.
and like, and that's total, like, how can you objectively judge music? There is, I mean, it's all totally based on your taste. It depends on your education. It depends how you were schooled. It depends on what music you're exposed to. So like, when, that's why I personally, like, okay, I have to admit, like, this is kind of guilty on my part. I did the ABRSM exams. Like I did the conservatory level exams until I think grade 4 piano and grade 5 theory, I think. But then after that, I've never done a musical exam or a musical competition. I do not agree with that. I don't agree with that idea of like, of judging other musicians and comparing all these things, and saying, oh, this is better than this, because at the end of the day, that's a totally subjective decision. There's no way you can be objective about it. And when I realized that about music, and also about my music, man, it gave me so much confidence and so much like certainty, which before I'd never had, because I didn't realize that. Like, I was always trying to live up to somebody's standard of what it meant to be a virtuoso, or a genius, or a composer of some merit. And I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't matter. Like, who cares? Like, you're imposing these standards on me, but why? Who makes you the authority? You know?
Right, right.
And so
Yeah.
you're right in what you said, that all music has its merit, and it might not be to your taste, but that doesn't invalidate it as an art form. It doesn't invalidate it as something being worth making and worth listening to.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's so much, like when you hear music, you hear so much of the person, I
Yes.
used to think so much, even in performance, like when you hear someone perform, you know them. That's why we all fall in love with pop stars. We know them, honestly. When you hear someone's voice, especially if they're writing the words, they're telling you about their life, we know them. They tell us about what makes them depressed and what makes them happy and what they're struggling with. So musicians, like they're automatically sharing it. Whenever someone shares their voice with you, or their composition or their playing, you get a sense of who they are.
Yeah.
And when it comes to world music and you hear traditional, very old art forms, you hear the culture of people for thousands of years, you hear it imbued in the music, and you're just like, so that's why I say it's like you could go anywhere when you say world music, because if you hear a genre that someone just made up yesterday in their room, you're hearing that person and everything they've been through, and why they did that. And then if you hear an ancient art form, like if you hear anything, like any like
The
world
chanting of
music.
Tibetan monks.
Exactly. I was trying to remember some. I've been, like Messiaen's inspiration in the Japanese music, but I'm forgetting all the pieces. But when you hear all these things, yeah, you hear the ancient civilization, and you hear the things that the commonalities too between them, and you hear what people have liked and been interested in across the world in all these different genres. And but to be honest, it's something I have to research a lot more, but it's something that every time I hear any of it, I'm just immediately taken, no matter what it is. So me personally, I don't even know like where to start and like what the right way is to go into it, but it's just everything I hear, I just try and, I suck it in. You hear so much of the people.
Exactly. Yeah, and in that sense, music is an anthropological pursuit. If you think about
Right.
it, like, you know,
Hmm.
like it's always been about, you know, about human everything, human behavior, human interactions,
Right.
you know, uh, the social structures, the hierarchies. I mean, if you look at an orchestra, that's a perfect example of like a pyramid, you know, like or the top down, you know, structure where it's
Right.
like the composer is God, and then you know the conductor is the prophet or the Messiah, you know, telling everybody
Right.
God's intentions, and then
Right.
and then it gets, you know, diluted all the way down to the fourth violin or the fourth chair or whatever, and
Right. The guy with a couple of the background harmonies or whatever.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and it's like, and you look at that structure, and you're like, but what if the fourth violin has something really profound to say about that passage, like, or
Right.
about, like, the fourth violin wants to tell the conductor, you know, I don't agree with this passage that the composer wrote. I want to rewrite it. Like that never happens. Like you know, it's like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, music should be a collective thing. It should always be a collaboration. I mean, even when you're writing a piece for yourself and it's a solo piece, right? There's still a level of collaboration because there's, you know, there's all the other people that are creating in the same spaces, your peers, your, you know, all the people that you're working with. I mean, so you could argue that no music is truly, like, we don't live in an ahistoric vacuum, right? And then there's that myth of like originality, like, you know, everyone has to be original, and it's like, but there's no such thing. Like
Yeah.
if you lived where there was no other influence, and like you were on your own, you know, and like you had nothing and you made something, okay, fine, you could say that's original. But
Mhm.
like even when you think about it, the way that we think about color, for example, is like influenced by our culture. There's some cultures that don't even recognize, like, I don't know, like aquamarine green or something, you know, like
Right.
that doesn't even exist in their culture. And it's
Right.
like with music it's the same thing, right? Like, and so this idea of being original, or being, you know, or like having this top down structure, like these are things that I'm working really hard to like take down, like in the classical musical world. Like one of my ideas, you know, was that instead of the composer telling you, you know, this is what you play, like you would have every member of the orchestra write down a passage, and then the composer would look at that and rearrange that somehow, and then they would be playing the role of arranger, except that all of that music would then be taken to the conductor, and then the conductor would have to break it apart again after it's been, you know, scrambled. Yeah, it's like taking like
Right.
scrambled eggs and then unscrambling them, and then that whole musical piece is played by the orchestra, and then it's sampled by a DJ and played back in live real time while the orchestra is playing. Like that's the kind of shit that I'm interested in, because it's like that suddenly it's like, who's the author here? Who's in
Right.
charge? Like like it totally blurs that line. And then what about like all the stuff that, like, you know, the audience suddenly participates? Like Bobby McFerrin has been doing stuff with like playing the audience, and like that's so cool because suddenly like he's not the person that's playing at these people, he's playing like through them and with them, and like,
Mhm.
and to me, like, isn't that like that kind of dynamic interaction? I mean, that's what makes music so interesting, because,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, it's like we're part of this fabric, we're part of this tapestry that then becomes the music scene or the music industry or whatever you want to call it.
Right. And that's kind of like connected also to what I'm thinking of doing for my thesis in terms of breaking down that dimension. And the way that I'm thinking about that is, you know, it's been influenced by like the improvisation, the Stockhausen, like the Brian Eno that you mentioned is, to me, reminds me a lot of the intuitive music, like these short descriptions, very open-ended, right? And it gets you to think like, how different is music than life, you know? And especially when you start thinking about contemporary music, where like, that's a beautiful piece, you know? Like that's a beautiful, there's so many overtones, there's so much sound interaction in the rattling of keys, you know, or in any sound. There we go. Yeah, well, that's actual music, no doubt. Yeah, but there's so much, and you know, even and then you start looking again at world music, you know, and they're using these kind of instruments that just are almost just sounds. They're just creating sound worlds more than they're creating anything else, you know. And then in contemporary music, they do the same thing where they create these sound worlds. And then if everything can be used as a musical invention, like then what we're doing now is a concerto for two voices. And
Exactly. Yeah. And there's this guy called Mark Applebaum who has this like is concerto for like orchestra and florist.
mm, okay, right. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Just like how the flowers and the orchestral colors, like who even knows? I don't know what he's on, but it sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah.
Man, the number of times I've been asked like what drug I'm tripping on, like when I premiere like one of my pieces, like
Okay.
it's become like a regular occurrence. People are like, what were you on when you wrote this, or what are you on right now? And I'm just like, man, I'm high on life.
Exactly. Yeah, that's all you need. That's all you need. Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so what I'm thinking of doing for the thesis is like finding ways to really turn life into like an opera. So to have an opera that is actually just life, and to just find ways to incorporate the idea of improvisation based on certain parameters. Like what is life other than some kind of improvisation we all are given with very limiting parameters. None of us can fly, none of us can breathe underwater. There are parameters that define every human, and we're all improvising to those same parameters, you know?
Except that then we do. I mean, we think about it like Leonardo da Vinci, was thinking about flying like in the 15th century, and like
Mhm.
and now daredevils jump off like Kilimanjaro in a wingsuit, and like there's been people who've skydived without parachutes. It was like a Red Bull thing,
Yeah.
there's people that have dived off of like heights that were considered, where you would break all your bones, but somebody invented a technique where you could dive from really, really high into like a really short amount of water. There's a guy that like goes to the top of this massive tower and jumps into like a kiddie pool full of like 3 inches of water and survives.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Like this is the kind of like human being, we think that there's limitations, but like look at the pearl divers who like spend 5 minutes or 4 minutes underwater just, to find an oyster with a pearl. Like
That's true.
so
Yeah.
like, when you really think about it, the only limit I think is our imagination. Like at
Right.
the end of the day, like that's literally the only, well, that and technology, I guess. But like,
We invent it, right? Like you say, we imagine the technology and we work towards it, like Da Vinci did. And but the thing is, like, the idea is that that's still improvising within the
yes.
parameters of what a human is doing. But we can take it far. We can take it really far, you know. But the other thing is, there's like that brings a connectivity, I think, you know. Like I was thinking the other day, if you brought someone from the 1100s to today, I used to think they would never be able to adapt, but over time I've started to think that they would be able to adapt. Because what is it that we do that is beyond comprehension? We text, it's just talking. We're in this video screen, it's like us just being in a room, you know? We make Facebook profiles, like all these kinds of, I mean, we do a lot, don't get me wrong, there's a lot. We have cars, there's a lot of technology, but what is a car other than something getting you from one place to another? They understood these concepts, right? There's like that human ness, there's a
Yes.
humanness that we're all working within, and this separation that we imagine is like not even there, even through time. Like, yes, of course, anybody, if they were brought to a new thing, is going to be confused for a while, but it's not like we're aliens to them. We're only trying to do the things they're trying to do. They'd be happy. They'd get so excited after they figured it out, you know, they'd be having a great time. Because, you know, it's just the development of like the human as a species. You know, I think the development of the human as a species has not changed that much. Like the human, the what the human is, you know, like on
Totally.
a biological level, it hasn't changed that much. So it's just there is that connectivity that we're all working within these parameters, and as we develop through time and make slight nuances and advancements, we start to understand and do new things that the old ones didn't get to in time. And, you know, in 1,000 years, we're going to be so basic. Everything we do is going to be the most basic thing ever in 1,000 years. You know, we're going to be like cave people or whatever, or like, you know, people from 1,000 years ago. So it's just, we develop and we nuance, but you know, there's that connectivity, and it's trying to connect. That's the great thing about music. You get a glimpse, you know, when you hear music from 1,000 years ago, you hear it's a beat. It's like this. It's four on the floor. It's the same thing we dance to at every nightclub. That's why if you brought a guy from 100s, if you brought a guy from 1,000 years ago here, he'd hear that four on the floor too at a nightclub, and he'd be like, "Oh, we're just all like shaking our butts. We did that too." You know? There's know, you see that connectivity in the music. You see how people have the same goals, even no matter how far you go, you know, it's the same goals.
Yeah.
That's just how they did it because they were there. And now
Right.
we're here and we're doing it in our way. In
Right.
1,000 years, we're going to do the same things in a slightly different way.
Yeah, and it's like this idea, like I forget who I heard say this. They're like, it's music for the mind and the booty, and I was like, is there a difference?
Right. Exactly.
Like you know, because like when like we dance to four on the floor and we think that that's like whatever, but like if you look at polyrhythmic music and we're like, oh my god, that's so intellectual, especially like in Western classical music, you play a polyrhythm and everyone's like, oh my god, holy shit, this is so radical. I'm like, just come to Tanzania. Like the kids here, they're dancing polyrhythmically before they can even speak, man. Like, so like you
Yeah.
think this is so complex and like it's only music for the mind? I'm like, nah, there is no distinction. Like the music
No
that we
real.
make, because it's like even the making of music, the consuming of music, it has so much to do with the body, right? Because like we're obviously using our bodies to make this music, and you could argue that like now people are making music that's just like with their minds. They truly are making music with their minds. Like I think the second person or the third person that I interviewed on this podcast, her name is Angie Coombs, and she connected a brainwave reader to this synthesizer called Tonto, um,
Right.
and she was playing the synthesizer with her mind, like she was imagining
Right.
stuff, and I'm like, and like that literally, like, I mean, your body is almost like not part of the equation anymore, like, but it's still informed by the body, because she was like, she was saying that like in order to get the synth to go up and down, she was thinking about flames as they were like eating at her body, and like that's a sensation that you could only know if you had a body.
Right, exactly. Everything's physical, There's an element of physicality.
Yes.
It goes both ways. Even in the mind, it's the brain, and the
Yes.
brain is electronic, reactions. There's a level of physicality, I think, in almost anything.
Yeah.
But I think there's also in the same way a level of spirituality in everything, And in
Absolutely.
any physical act you do, there's at least a little, if not a lot, of spirituality that's connected to it, Probably
Absolutely.
full amount, to be honest, and we just don't know. Every physical and spiritual thing, they're probably balanced. People actually have known that for a long time, I think.
Yes.
When you study ancient philosophy too, you
Yes.
see that, they've known that everything's in balance, like the spiritual and the physical world, they're just balanced.
Absolutely.
So, everything we do is connected.
And science is starting to touch on that. Like when you look at quantum physics and the reality of the quantum world, I mean,
Yeah.
these are things
Yeah.
that are inherently spiritual. I mean, like the
Right.
idea of being in two places at once, or
Exactly.
your actions, or the actions of one proton here are influencing one proton millions of miles away. And how they're somehow connected. There's a relationship, and it's like when you see this kind of stuff being uncovered by science, you realize that ancient people knew this intuitively, internally, spiritually, like they
Mhm.
understood these concepts.
Yeah, they understood them maybe from a more spiritual and less, physical realm, and
Yes.
because of where they were. It's because of where they were in time,
Yeah.
and we always learn. That's the other thing. It's always growing. It's not
Yes.
like humans, every generation can only add on to what the
Yes,
last one.
it's always additive. I mean,
But
except when we forget. But then even then, the idea is that like all knowledge is. I mean, this is a very spiritual idea, but the idea is that all knowledge is already there. But we just forgot. We just and the process of like making these discoveries or figuring stuff out. That's just a process of learning what we already know, except that we've
right.
chosen to forget it.
Right. Yeah. Just trying to get into that, because there is an element of that. It is all there, and you're just like, because if it wasn't, how would you get it?
Exactly.
You can't get it unless it's there. You're not,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get it. So there's that's the very kind of metaphysical and philosophical or spiritual idea of it, of looking at things, and it all connects to the music, but in a way, like it makes me think about the way that music is like a tool almost. Music is only a tool, and it's of something else. Like I say, every time someone plays, it's their own personality. You can just hug them. It's like you can go to someone's concert, you can give them a hug. But it's like you're getting to know someone. Musicality becomes the tool to express an idea,
Yes.
So it's like all of us musicians, like, yes, we're musicians, but there's a core there that we could use. You know, it's a tool. If we had another tool, it would be the same thing. But sometimes certain tools, you know, are more intuitive to
Conducive,
certain people.
right?
Exactly. So that's what it all kind of ends up forming as. But the thing is, yeah, it's just really incredible that that line of, you know, how a person is put together and what music can be for people. It's just very, like I said, it's kind of connected to my thesis, this kind of breaking down of that line, like what's the difference between music and life in a way, and just trying to understand that. Work with that. Hopefully I'll have that figured out in the next 3 years, you know, trying to figure out how to put that
Hey,
together.
man, even if it takes you the rest of your life,
Yeah.
I think it's worth doing.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and when you think you've really figured something out, and then and then the next second it's like the rug is like taken away from under your feet, and you're suddenly like, I thought I knew this, and it's like, and you knew nothing, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the greatest thing about learning. If you're learning, it means you're just constantly realizing how little you know, you know?
Exactly,
It's a great, it's a great feeling for sure.
it is. And then
Powerful feeling.
I'm sure you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect. You know,
I'm not actually. You should tell me about
the Dunning-Kruger effect. So it's this idea that people that are that are sort of less intelligent will judge themselves as being more intelligent because they think that because they don't know how much they don't know, they think they're so smart. Or somebody who's incredibly intelligent will always like judge their intelligence on a lower level because they know just how much they don't know,
it. Right,
you know.
exactly. Yeah.
And it's actually it's a phenomenon that's observable. I mean, Trump is like the perfect example, of
Mm.
like of this like playing out like in real life, where he thinks he's the smartest person around because he's really not.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's really complicated, especially once you get into politics, because yeah, politics is like music, which is like philosophy. What's the difference between politics and life, you know? And it gets so ambiguous, like, and in the same way that the politics is a tool of expression in a way. Like
Yeah.
politics is the tool of the politician expressing themselves. They had to be
Yes.
politicians. And then everything that goes with that, you know? So that's like, so once you get into politics, yeah, it's the same as talking about a lot of different things. It's just really a means of expression of a soul, and the way that they do that and approach it. Yeah, so there's always a lot to unravel with politicians, because that's a complex soul. Definitely, it's a very complex soul, someone who wants to be a politician, because it takes a lot to think that you're gonna to think to represent a large amount. It's like being a composer. It takes a specific, to be a performer, to be anything takes a soul, because it to that intensity of a soul to have the drive to do a thing, you know,
Yes.
and the drive to wake up, the drive to make dinner, you know. So it's all there, and you know, it's the drive to compose a piece that 80 people are going to be in tuxedos playing, and 1,000 people are going to be sitting in an audience, you know, or you know, and then to have the soul to be a politician, to be at the top of a nation and trying to organize that, you know. There's so the kind of the soul, it builds, and it's really complex to understand how someone's external is representing an internal, and vice
Yes.
versa, you know.
Yes.
So
And then the idea, the false dichotomy between the inner and outer worlds. I mean, they are so inextricably linked. It's almost impossible to really say this is outer and this is inner. You know,
yeah, it's
and,
like
and
what we were saying with physical and spiritual. It's
yeah,
just the same.
it is. It is. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the artist Reggie Watts.
Yeah, great. I love his stuff. Yeah, he's hilarious. He's really hilarious.
So like, and then a lot of people will say, is there room for humor in classical music? And I'm like, go look at Victor Borge.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's the guy who's hilarious. Yeah, he uses classical music. Yeah. It's really interesting to think also of, you know, opera buffa too, like Mozart operas. I remember being surprised at how funny Mozart operas actually were. It's another thing that reminded me of like the human, we're all humans, because the jokes that Mozart makes, they're not like old timey jokes. They're just like jokes that we understand a lot of the time, you know. It's like you would see it in a show. So it's like, yeah, that kind of
He makes fart jokes, he makes poop jokes. I mean, the guy, right? Like,
exactly. So it used to be very close. It used to be very close. And I'm not sure. It's interesting because today in 21st century music, how often do we hear a piece that's intentionally supposed to make people laugh? Rare. Maybe I just don't know enough about it. But you know, in Mozart's time, if you went to that opera and you didn't laugh, he's going to be offended. He's going to know if you're not laughing during his opera, he messed up, you know? So that's an interesting thing. Like, you know, it's easier with text, of course, you know, and maybe Haydn is an example, or, but you know, to think about Stravinsky is an example of someone who wrote pieces that made people chuckle and he wasn't offended at times. I read about his premiere of the Symphony of Psalms where people started laughing at some of the gestures because they were so, not Symphony of Psalms, sorry, Symphonies of Winds during the premiere. People were laughing because the sounds were kind of, he was homaging to very, very old style lines, like Stravinsky does with his kind of primitivism, as they sometimes call it. So people were laughing chuckling at times during the premiere. And they said, there was a review by Rubinstein, the oldest Rubinstein, the one who was a contemporary of Stravinsky, I think Anton, who said that there was a glint in the composer and conductor's eyes and they weren't in any way offended because the music was supposed to take you out of your comfort zone. And if you felt like chuckling, then you could. And maybe that's the closest we have to, you know, people laughing during performances and composers being happy during instrumental music. But yeah, it's a really interesting thing, the idea of, you know, bringing humor back into classical music because it was never supposed to be separate.
Exactly. And also this idea that like folk music and classical music are different. It's like, no, I mean, a lot of the pieces that Bach wrote were inspired by dance and by the dance form, you know, by folk dances. So it's like, there is no separation. There really isn't. And you know, also this idea of like concert etiquette, you know, of people sitting politely, not clapping between movements, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, if you feel inspired to clap, like, you know, in between movements, do it. Like, why not? You know, like, and some classical music purists will then, you know, get really mad at me for saying stuff like that. And so then, you know, partially because of that and other reasons, I started a series where, you know, the concerts were called Purists Beware.
Nice. That's a great name for a series.
And you know, and like I had a concert in Nova Scotia where like I had a piano suspended from the ceiling and I was throwing tennis balls at it from like different from places marked on the stage. Like I had like the composition was basically the distance from the piano, like how far away from the piano am I throwing the ball?
Wow.
And it was like a bunch of old white ladies who had come for a classical music concert, and, dude, there was pretty much like everybody afterwards. They came up to me. They're like, you know, we want a refund. We want our money back. You know, what? This is not classical music. What's wrong with you? Like, what are you doing? You're bastardizing classical music. I was like, isn't that the point?
Yeah, exactly. You got to keep innovating. You know, you got to throw away the old in some ways.
Yeah. But as you know, ironically, like you said, I mean, we're always inspired and informed by tradition. It's not like as musicians, like we're standing on the shoulders of all these people that have come before us that have done all these things. So actually, all these things that are so innovative and that we think are so hip and avant-garde and new, they're actually not that new and avant-garde. I mean, this shit has been done like forever. You know, it's like throwing a tennis ball at a piano. Like, what's so new about that? Like, you know, and
I'm sure one of Bach's kids did it, you know. I'm sure Bach heard that sound, like maybe on a harpsichord, but you know, Bach probably played clusters, you know, like all these old. They knew the same sounds in some ways.
Exactly.
And we keep
Yeah, I agree. And you know, and a lot of people will say, oh, you know, there's a particular way that you have to play Bach, and I'm like, but even Bach understood that like playing Bach was not done a particular way. Like it was, you know, it's like it's a living tradition. It's this living tradition where, and some people will say, oh, you know, if Bach had access to, you know, an organ with electropneumatic action and like all these, you know, colors, he would still play the same way that he did back then. But we know that that's nonsense because I mean, like he asked organ builders to build the instruments according to, you know, what he was imagining. Like he asked them to build certain stops. He asked them to change the action of the keyboard. You know, he asked them to change the action of the pedal board and the way that it was shaped. So we know for a fact that all these composers that we think of as being limited by their times, you know, they're not. I mean,
Mhm.
they were, yes, they were products of their time, but they're also timeless because I mean you can play Bach on pretty much any instrument and it sounds incredible. Like there's a xylophone somewhere in Japan, I think, which is like made down a hill. It's like steps, like these wooden steps. It's this massive xylophone, and when you roll a ball down it, like it plays a Bach fugue.
Wow, nice.
And it's just
That sounds really cool.
these wooden blocks. It's like this massive
Right.
xylophone that's played by gravity.
That's crazy. That's amazing. Yeah.
and and like if his music can survive that translation, like
Right.
come on,
There's
you
something there, definitely, right?
so it's like even the music that we make as quote contemporary composers, I mean, yes, it's a product of its time, and yes, you know, it's definitely, you know, it's definitely something that is contemporary or modern, but at the same time it's also timeless. Like I'm sure if somebody heard your composition 1,000 years ago, you know, and they were, you know, transported somehow with a time machine, I mean
Mhm.
the music would make sense to them because music is music, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. They would hear new things. They might hear new things, right? And how
Yes,
do we often react to new things? Sometimes with a little bit of like stepping back.
uncertainty.
Exactly, right? But you find someone who would be able to cope with that, and then they'll be able to cope with it the same way that anybody can cope with with that same thing today, you know? So yeah, there is that timelessness of people. If you played Schumann to someone 400 years before Schumann, they probably would have eventually come around to it
Yes,
eventually, you know?
yes.
And so and the other way too. If you play Schumann in 200 years, people will also probably enjoy it. Who knows though? They might be on something very different, but
Exactly. Yeah,
they'll
and like what does it mean to be ahead of your times or to be a man of your time or to be anachronistic? Like what does this even mean? Like I like you said, like you know, it's all a continuum. So like all these distinctions of like your music is futuristic. It's futuristic to who? That's the
right.
question. You know, it's like
Yeah.
and who
Even
claim
someone who only, sorry,
go ahead. No,
I
no,
was
no, go
saying
ahead.
even someone who writes only in like the style of an old composer doesn't make that isn't new in the way that they're doing it. It's going to be new, even if their goal is to sound as much like an old composer as possible, like maximum sound like Beethoven. That's still something you could only do in the way they're doing it when they do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
If they tried to do that 30 years ago, maybe there wouldn't be as much YouTube for you to listen to every sonata and get his style as well, you know, like as much free access to all the kind of stuff. So everything is only a result of its time. Like you're saying,
Yes.
there's no such thing. If you're writing music, hey, and it's 2020, it's 2020 music. It was put out in 2020 or 2021, should I say, you know, there's no way to not be contemporary if you're alive.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm sure you're familiar with Eric Satie and like his you know his quirks. Um,
Right.
like he started a church called Jesus Christ the Conductor, something of Jesus Christ, and he was the only member of this church, but he would faithfully have a church meeting every Sunday or like whenever it was, and he would actually meet and he would recite stuff and like, but he was the only member of this church.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's funny. It's at that point, it almost sounds like a meditation, a weekly meditation. And honestly, how bad would it be for any of us to have a time every week where we set aside for ourselves to do readings and meditate? You know, that'd be the greatest thing ever. So, you know, Sati, he was on something, you know, something smart because we all need that time. We
Yeah.
all need that time every day, a time to, you know, set aside and take the time for ourselves and meditate and read and whatever, do something kind of ritualistic. It helps, I think,
No,
any
I think
human.
so too. I agree. I agree with you. And you know, it's interesting because, like for example, when Steve Jobs would always wear a black turtleneck and jeans, and you know, this idea of having like, and that was like a rebellion against, you know, the formalism of, you know, of work, you know, where you had to wear a suit. Well, you know, Eric Satie had like he bought six of the same pair like he bought six of the same suit in the same color in the same material cut exactly the same way, and he wore each suit until it got totally worn out, and then he just went to the next one. So for I think a space of like 13 years he basically wore, according to everybody, the same outfit, never changed. And it's
Right.
like, and people think that like that kind of like practice is like so hip and revolutionary, and it's like but people have had uniforms and people have had certain rituals in their lives. Like look at monks. Monks are wearing this outfit all the
Yeah.
time. Like it becomes like it's a way to not only stand out, but in a way fit in.
Yeah, exactly. And
And it's
and
like
there's
this.
so many
Yeah, go
things
ahead.
that you can think of it as almost like a limitation that gives you freedom, you know? A lot of limitations do give you freedom, I feel like. When you limit yourself, you have something to work within, right? It's
Yes.
like that's like being the human, like we were talking before, like kind of those human limitations or whatever that are not. It's just that when you have that, then now you can do everything because you know what that is. You know that you can break from it and what ways you can break from it and how you can break from it and when and where and what and why. So it's all about knowing those limitations. And I think sometimes with those ritualistic things or anything like wearing the same outfit every day, it creates a limitation that people, I think, like monks and like Eric Satie used to create some level of freedom within their spirit, probably. But there's a
Yes.
lot of elements to it, right? But it gives you a limitation that allows you a freedom somewhere else. And I think, that's a lot of what they think about in those types of things. And it's like you say, it's an ancient thought. How old? It's probably since the beginning of time. Like the third human was probably a monk. He was like a loner, or the same thing. I don't know. But it's like it's old. Nothing is new, right? We can only build and kind of experience it in the way that we can,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. And it's amazing because like a game of chess, the rules are there. But then you have somebody like Bobby Fischer who comes along and invents chess 960 where like the back rank is arranged in a random order and like because he was bored of regular chess. And so,
Right.
and so but then you realize people are like, "Oh, that's not chess." I'm like, "Of course it's chess. Of course
Right.
it's chess. It's like of course it's chess. You might call it a chess, a variant of chess, if you
Mhm.
really wanted to get very technical, but it's still chess. So
Yeah.
like human existence, yes, there's all these variations, there's all these variants, but at the end of the day, it's still human existence. And that's
Exactly.
that's why I think you're right. Like it's relatable. Like no matter where you come from, no matter what time period you're in, like you can relate.
Hmm. And then I think we start to see examples like Saint Francis, who I talk about because Messiaen has a really amazing opera about Saint Francis's kind of some portraits of his life, and
Of Assisi.
Liszt wrote a lot of Sorry, I should specify. Yeah, Saint Francis of Assisi, and Liszt also has a piece about Saint Francis of Assisi as well as another Saint Francis because Franz was his first name. But I think about the level of, like you say, we're all humans and there are different variants. And then I think people like St. Francis also realize that there's life and then we're just different variants of life. These people were so involved with like animals and nature. And he was a guy who was very, very involved with nature and allegedly preached to animals and was very good friends with a wolf and all these kinds of things. But it's just the idea that, life, we're all just variants of life. And then we're all just variants of existence in the physical realm. And then this table and a door, we're just a different type. I don't know if I'm ready for that, but the idea that we're all different. We're all like, it's just, we're different but connected, And
Right.
again, every time you end up taking these thoughts all the way to the end, it just ends up being a thought that some guy said like 5,000 years ago or more. Because that's someone already figured it all out, Like you
Yeah.
say, we already knew it all, and we're just kind of continually coming back to it in different ways.
And that's the it's in Sufi, in mystical Islam, they talk about this idea that uh, we all are the one, but like in different forms. And like when you strip away form, what's left?
Right, right.
you know
Yeah.
and in Sufi poetry, there's this incredible poem where I think it's Rumi or maybe Hafiz who says, you say no to me and don't ask me why, but this delights me.
Right. Right. That's really beautiful. It reminds me of that, the idea of limitation. If you say no, it's like a limitation that gives them freedom somehow. For whatever reason it does, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be different. But yeah, every limitation is freeing. But, in a way,
Yes.
it's like every closed door is an opportunity as much as every open door is an opportunity.
Exactly. And it's this idea that if we didn't have the boundaries, if we didn't have the lines, if we didn't have the limitations, then what would we push against?
Right, exactly.
Because those are the things that ironically give our life meaning, are the things that we push against, the things that we decide, like, okay, am I going to step out of this box, or am I going to stay in this
Right.
box? Or is there even a box, and am I just standing in a circle?
Right, exactly. That's what it always, yeah, exactly. It's those limitations, those lines and lack thereof that kind of give us our freedom and our expression
And even
and the way
meaning.
that manifests.
Yeah, and even meaning. Like, we generate meaning from these things.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, it's an endless journey that brings you to an answer that's already there. So
Exactly. It almost seems like it's like the world's worst game.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's really interesting, really interesting. That's why we're here. We're all here because we found it interesting, I guess, enough to be here.
Exactly. Exactly. I 100% agree with that. I concur totally. I wanted to ask you about your favorite organ.
Mm.
I know that this is a difficult question and a cliched question even. And I don't have a favorite organ. It doesn't exist yet. I'm building it. But I wanted to ask you, do you have a favorite organ?
That's a good question. I would have to explore the organs in Orgle Park because I
Yes.
don't even like know the name of the one that I think is my favorite, but the one that I've kind of think I've heard, this organ where they can adjust all the air pressure for like
That,
every pipe.
and
It's like,
Hans Ola was part of the committee that did that.
yeah, I think the recording I have heard of it is him playing a piece
Yeah.
on that organ. And yeah, that I would have to say is my favorite organ. But, other than that, every organ is beautiful. I'm kind of one of those guys that would
Yes.
like play every organ, like even like the worst digital organ. I would go there if it was one manual and I would try and play like Tannhäuser just so everyone would have a great time. Or, like a big orchestral piece because you can play we've all been in a practice room and played a huge symphonic piece on an 8-foot flute, right? And we've all still been moved. If you love the music, you're still moved, so every organ has a thing that makes it really, really beautiful. And I love to play every instrument. I love to get to know every instrument. Some take a long time to get to know, but
Yes.
you know I I haven't had, it's like the pianos, I need more time to get to know them, but
That's
you know
totally fair, man. And that insatiable curiosity, like I have the same thing, it's like I see an instrument somewhere, even in someone's home, and I'm like instantly drawn to it. Like
right,
when I was a kid, there was an instrument there. Like you can guarantee that was the first place I would just I would gravitate towards it. And
right,
sometimes I wouldn't even ask permission. I would just start playing.
right. Yeah, exactly, that's the
Yeah.
best way.
And like
Yeah,
and then like I had to learn that actually you have to ask permission to play instrument. But I mean I've like blurred that line or questioned that line so much,
right.
like and I actually I snuck into Maison Symphonique and played the organ,
Smart man.
and and I publicly live streamed it on Facebook, and
Oh,
then like three hours into this live stream, Jean-Willy Koons walks in. He's like, "Who the hell are you? And what are you doing on my organ?"
oh my God. That is a crazy story. Wow. Really,
Dude,
he's a great.
I could have been arrested for that.
I know that's a risky move. I've always thought about it because, like going to any church and playing the organ, because nobody knows anything about organ. So if they hear it and it doesn't sound like too weird, they'll just be like, "Oh, I guess that guy's supposed to be there."
Exactly, dude. And you know what? I actually did it a second time. So after Jean Willy was like, "Don't ever do this again," like because I'd only played the electric console, the one on stage, and I wanted to play the mechanical one. So I snuck in through the artist entrance. Everybody assumed I was meant to be there. I was wearing a suit and like a funny hat, and I had a walking cane. I had a cane with me, and I just walked in like I was meant to be there. went onto the mechanical console, played the organ, left. Nobody knew. Nobody was any the wiser.
Let's hope Jean-Billy doesn't watch this podcast.
Dude, it's public knowledge now, man. It's like it's public. Dude, I posted the videos on Facebook and they're all public. Like I
Right.
did.
Okay.
I wasn't. Dude, I did it as like. Dude, I even did other weird shit in Montreal. Like there were these sculptures. There were these sculptures, these metal, like giant metal sculptures. You know, I went there and I touched one of them by mistake, and I was like, holy shit, that sounds cool. That sounds like a giant gong. So then the next day I went over with, like, you know, mallets and drumsticks and brushes and all kinds of stuff. I started playing these sculptures. About an hour into playing, you know, the guard comes out. He's like, stop doing this, or I'm going to call the police. I was like, call the police. So the police came, and then the police came there, and they were like, what's the problem? And they're like, this guy's playing the sculptures. I was like, this is public property, and nobody can tell me not to. They're like, yeah, you're right, nobody can. And then the police just stood there for like half an hour and listened to what I was doing.
Nice. Yeah, they're really, I mean, in Montreal, they have that drum circle they do.
Yeah, at the park.
And that's incredible, man. Yeah, Montreal is a really, really cool place for creativity.
Yeah.
And openness.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I mean, dude, I have been arrested for doing these kinds of like experiments and
Right.
shit. And, like, I don't mind. Like, to be very honest with you, like, almost, you know, it's like I'm willing to take the risk because it's like I think it's worth doing. I think it's worth like doing this kind of art and showing people that it's possible. You know, because yeah, and you know, if you then get arrested, it just makes for a great story. You know,
Yeah.
and then
Hey, I'm glad, I've always thought about it, but I'm glad that you're doing it so I don't have to. Because yeah, I've always thought about sneaking to churches, but I don't think I'm too or into halls or anything like that to
Yeah.
play the organs, but
Yeah.
because I know that people would, for the most part, be none the wiser, and they'd probably be happy 90% of the time too.
Right.
So
Right.
it's an interesting thing because
Yeah.
you're scared to do something that is literally probably would make people happy. But
Yeah, exactly. And it's like if you're not going to damage the instrument, then what's the problem?
right,
You know,
exactly.
it was built to be played. That's how I see it anyway.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree.
and actually, like I got to play at Roy Thompson Hall, and you know, and then there was this concert that was happening, and somebody asked me who I was, and I said I'm an organist. And so somehow this like translated into I'm the organist for this tonight's program.
Oh.
And so and of course like I left the hall. You know, I was done with my practice. I just left the hall. And so they had like two guards standing by the organ the whole night because they were scared that in the middle of like Mendelssohn's, you know, in the middle of Mendelssohn's symphony, you know, there would be a random guy who would start playing the organ. And so I actually got banned from playing it at Roy Thompson Hall for like for a while, like because they were like you misrepresented yourself, and I think they weren't happy about the fact that I played Glenn Gould's piano. You know, there was like Glenn Gould's piano was like in the you know, on the outside, like where you know, it's like the foyer or whatever, and.
Mhm.
And you know, I played that piano and did like a live stream. They were not happy about that. They're like, "How dare you play, you know, Glenn Gould's piano?" And so yeah, like man, I get myself into these weird situations, and it's like
We need somebody to do it. So happy collectively as musicians, we're happy someone does it. Because yeah, it's Glenn Gould's piano, should be played. Should be played every day till it doesn't work anymore and throw it out. I'm joking. It's hard to say.
Sacrilege! How dare you say that?
I mean, Glenn Gould, he made the recordings. Either way, it's his piano. No one's going to sound like Glenn Gould when they play that piano.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
he made those recordings. So if you want to hear how that piano, I mean, when it comes to
It was
this
actually slightly out of tune.
yeah, exactly. Nobody care. Obviously, nobody cares about actually keeping it, and they just want to use it as like a picture. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you can do whatever you. I think it's okay to do those things because, you know, it is what it is. We're moving through in 1,000 years and 2,000 years, like, you know, why
Who's
not
gonna
even-
care? Yeah, it's good. It's like it's. I mean, if you really think about it, like people make such a big deal out of these kinds of things, but you know, it's like, I mean, the heart is that of a musician. It's like you just want to play. It's like you're a perpetual kid in a sandbox. You know, like who does the sandbox belong to? Like, you know, if you're at the swings in the local park and someone's like, don't go on those swings. You know, it's like, nah, man, this is it's meant to be used. It's like it's there. You know, in a way, I would argue that all of these things are our collective cultural heritage, and so they belong to everyone. Even you know, even though of course, like Roy Thompson Hall and the organ and the piano, they all belong to somebody. They belong to somebody. But like, you know, when you really think about it, this is our collective cultural legacy, and so we all, in a way, own it. Even though that idea of ownership is, you know, so stupid and like an idea that's like, that's so absurd when you really think about it. Like, who owns anything? Like, who does it belong to? Of course, like when it comes to things like intellectual property and copyright infringement and things like that. But really, like, okay, does Steve Jobs own the iPhone or the iPad? Like, does he really? And when you look at this,
iPhone, it's like, how far does it go?
yeah,
But
exactly. And then there's the fact that he stole technology from so many other places, and he stole ideas from so many other places. And these people never got credit, they never got paid. And yet Apple is a multi-billion-dollar industry,
yeah, right.
you know?
Yeah, it's all ambiguous, and especially when you get more and more into it, because there's the element of like economics and then back to politics as usual somehow. But so much becomes involved with everything that it doesn't exist in its one thing. That Glenn Gould's piano belongs as much to music as it belongs to the world of economics, and how someone is trying to make money off having someone come to that concert so that someone can pay the second violinist check. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many, there becomes so many complexities that you have to continue kind of exploring those. Like, that's something I'm interested in doing too, is like exploring the different levels that there are even beyond the music in order to better understand music and life, because you have to kind of have that kind of multifaceted approach, And I use that within music at first by doing piano, organ, composition, switching around there. And now it's about taking that from music to other, disciplines to get that kind of wider understanding. And philosophy is something that I've been interested in a lot, and just like economics is something I'm trying to get interested in. And but there's so many levels. I'm also learning about video editing these days, and sound engineering.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that you can use that are to broaden your scope, and then you can use them in any way. I can use my video editing skills to make better music, or I can use my music skills to make better videos. Like everything ends up going both ways.
Yeah, it's like the practice is informed by the practice.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You just have to keep kind of building and learning.
Exactly. And it's interesting too, because like one of the pieces that Mark Applebaum wrote was like a piece for 4 conductors and no instruments.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's all these conductors waving their arms at each other. And it's like, is that music? But of course it's music, like, exactly. In the same way as me, just flailing my arms around and, dancing wildly in the street, and there's no quote music. But hey, what if I'm listening to the sound of the rain and the sound of the wind and the sound of the ocean and that's the music? Like, like you think about it, like that's nature's installation, right? Like that. Like, think about it, and where do we get all these inspirations for all these patterns that we see in music? Inevitably, they all come from nature.
Exactly, they do.
And like, and some people take that very far, and they, like they'll make a composition that's based on Fibonacci sequence, or or on pi, or on Euler's number, or something very, something like that. But really, like even when you play a C major chord, somehow, somewhere, it's linked to something that's natural. It came from there,
It did, yeah. I mean, there's so many things you can think about, even if you start thinking about frequencies.
Yeah.
And how when you start multiplying frequencies by, like, if you multiply frequency by 2, you get an octave. And you multiply by 2. It's the overtone series. That's how you build the overtone series. You just multiply the frequency, Multiply by 7, you're going to get the 7 partial. So you multiply by 11, you're going to get the 11 partial. So it's mathematical. It's just like, it's that simple. And when you get to the math of it, it ends up, like you say, it's nature. Because nature and math are another thing that are just kind of intrinsically connected. And so, like, even something like our manipulation of frequencies into instruments and the way we've organized it according to our ear is in many ways connected to principles of math and science, which are connected to principles of nature, Yes. And again, I keep coming back to it. That's what my thesis is all about, is that idea that that's all happening around us, that opera, like you say, that sound, the oceans, the water, everything. We're already experiencing this amazing piece of music, and I just want to highlight that. And also brings the idea that nobody is absent from that. Like, nobody is missing that amazing experience at any moment, And it can be anybody. It doesn't have...
Even if you're deaf, deaf. There's DJs, there's musicians that are deaf that are actually feeling the speaker, and that's how it's like, I mean, like, really, at the end of the day, sound is just a frequency like light's a frequency. So even if you're a blind person, you can still see,
Exactly. Yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
There's so many, yeah, it's so complicated when you think about that like that. And like, you can, when you start getting deep in composition too, you can look, I've had arguments with this about my friends, but you can look at a piece of music, at just the score, and it's just as beautiful as listening. I don't,
Yes.
it's not any less beautiful. I was surprised when people were trying to tell me that it was. They're like, oh, only listening is as good. I'm like, how? Because you can see it all there. And it's not even about even hearing it. It's not even, it can be though, not to say it's not, but you can just look at it and the scores are themselves beautiful, beautiful pieces of art. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
look at
totally.
contemporary art and
Yeah,
lines and dots and just like the balance and the proportions are
yeah,
all present in the score. You can see
exactly.
all the proportions and you can see everything that makes it gorgeous, all the lines, the way they interact, you see it all, and it's
And
just
you look at the handwritten scores, or yeah, it's like, but it's weird because like we're all obsessed about how the graphic score is such a new idea. And I'm like, every score is graphic.
yeah, exactly. That's what scores are, right? It's true. It's graphic notation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're just kind of giving people an idea of when you want a frequency to go up on some sort of timbre. You know what I'm saying? Like that's all you're designing. And we've come up with many, many ways, especially in the modern time with computers, of designing ways to to define those parameters.
Yeah.
Like that's why I love electronic music. Like it's so different when you think about what some of its aesthetic goals are, like Stockhausen's electronic music, and to an extent Lachenmann and Ligeti explored it very well, but Stockhausen is one of my favorites for that kind of thing. And it's like he was making music when they first brought him into the studio. They thought he would be the best at it, and they're like, all right, we just bought this $5,000 or $10,000 keyboard so you can hook up to the synths. But little do they know, it's like you don't need the keyboard. You can just modify the frequencies and apply filters to it, apply, low frequency oscillators to it, apply all these types of effects to just sound as an abstract thing. Stockhausen was like, toss out the keyboard. The guy was like, what? We just spent 10 grand. But, it becomes about manipulating the sound, and I've had so much fun. Like I was telling you, I've been coding sounds and trying to code sounds that actually sound like animals, just to create that. It's really complex to explain, but it's like you start from a frequency, right? So you start from like, I want a sine wave at this many hertz, and then you keep manipulating it via, it's coding. So it's really nice. You do it all mathematically, and you're like adding sine waves to sine waves. You're also multiplying them and you put envelopes and all these things until you get an organic sound, and I was doing it with bird sounds, all the different types of randomizers you can put on certain parameters to create a sound that's like a bird sound. And then research, I realized, I read about the fact that, even the human voice is the most basic synthesizer, because we have an oscillator as our vocal box, and we have filters in our mouth and throat that kind of shape the way that oscillator is being used. So it's just like, it gets really, everything is connected. Every voice is just a synth. It's just the exact same as it's just a really good analog synth,
Exactly.
organic analog synth. So there's so much you can learn from like studying that kind of stuff, because that's what I love about contemporary music is we're getting closer and closer to that, like closer and closer to studying that. Like, how does the voice box create sound, and like how can we work with that abstract principle? It's like such incredible discoveries in science and art. That's the great thing about being in the contemporary era.
Yeah. Well, you know how Brian Eno says that he's a self-proclaimed non-musician? Well,
Oh, yeah.
I'm a self-proclaimed non-composer, but like pretty much everything I do is composition. So like,
Right.
because like, I mean, as musicians, as composers, like we're constantly dealing with paradox, like we're living a paradox. We're constantly like, we have these dualities and all these, almost irreconcilable like realities that coexist and juxtapose. And it's like, when you call yourself a composer, you call yourself a musician, what does that even mean? you know, because like I could be a painter and call myself a composer, you know, like I could be an architect or a sculptor or a gardener and call myself a musician. And I mean, and I would argue that like my music is a lot like architecture and gardening and sculpture and painting, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like,
That's the hope, right?
and
That's the hope. That's what we're trying to get to as composers.
because
Get
like
closer to those forms.
exactly, because like there, I mean, you think about it, you look at like Kandinsky's paintings and you look at Brian Eno's music, and you're like, if those were made together as one piece, that would make perfect sense. Like,
Right.
you know, like imagine, and they made like a giant exhibition of Van Gogh's Starry Night, like on like, you know, I think this was done at the ROM. Like they had this, you know, all these projections of Starry Night that were moving, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, like that, like so Van Gogh by painting that painting was anticipating the avant-garde film, you know, work of the 20th and 21st century, but he didn't even
Mm-hmm.
know what a camera was,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you
exactly.
know.
All those dichotomies. Yeah, you're even mentioning, you know, like in the way that an artist is a composer. I was just mentioning the other day to my friend, like looking at a duck in a pond and the way that it creates ripples
Yeah,
is so beautiful. Like it's so artistic. The way that they're influencing their environment is just like beautiful
yeah.
always. You know, so it's just like, is that duck like the greatest composer of all time? Like Bach is second to every duck that exists. But you know, the beautiful way that people and we all interact with life is artistic, and that's what every composer is trying to get to, is trying to represent and trying to approach this idea of how is what I make similar to life, you know,
Yeah,
your
yeah,
experience to
yeah.
your life, you know.
Yes.
So
Are you
really,
are you familiar with cymatics at all?
no, I don't think so. Cymatics, please.
Go. This is your homework, man. Go Google cymatics and look up some videos on YouTube, man. You are gonna freak out, man. You mentioned the ducks and the ripples, man.
Yeah.
You're gonna freak out when you see what cymatics are.
Oh,
I'm gonna just tell you what it is, though. It's like
I'm looking around, but
so cymatics is a subset of modal vibrational phenomena. The term was coined by Hans Jenny, a Swiss follower of the philosophical school known as anthroposophy. Anthroposophy. So anthropology and philosophy like combined together. And dude, they're incredible patterns, man. They're like, you know, like what mandalas look like. You know those mandalas that people draw,
right.
those like those Buddhist artworks. Man, it's like that, but in real time. And it could that sound can influence any matter. It could be sand, water, oil, fire, whatever, electricity. Man, it's
Right,
like
right.
it's like when you see how sound affects physical matter. It's like those ripples that the duck is making are actually compositions.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's an actual piece. Like that duck is just composing actual music. Like it's not even that philosophical. Like it's almost. It's. I'm pretty sure it's literal.
No, it is literal. It is literal, dude. That's the thing, man. It's like it's not even. It's like you're like, oh man, that's so deep, but it's like, no, man, it's the truth. It actually is happening. You know?
He's actually writing actual music that we're experiencing. You know, it's really really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was
Go.
looking at some pictures of cymatics, and I was seeing that some of it looks like coded. You see some of those things that like coded images that are kind of going on this infinite loop, and like that's kind of my next project too, because with the coded sound, like I say, you can do so much, and you can create natural things. You can kind of go towards that natural thing, and it would be interesting to start working with more and more with visuals. I was telling you, I was getting into video editing and stuff.
Yeah.
And with the PhD also being like a quasi opera, I'm really trying to maximize my exposure now to visual, like the world of visual. Because you know, we think a little bit about
It's a
visual as performers.
it's a quasi opera, and you are a oh, damn, you are a pseudo musician.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, just working with visuals and like, you know, you talk about throwing a tennis ball into a piano. That's, you're thinking a lot about visuals. Like that's an effect, a visual and effect, you know? That's what I'm saying. Even as composers or performers, we are part of the visual world because
Yeah.
people are often
And
looking at
theatrical, like the theatrical.
it.
Like, like when a pianist finishes a piece and then they raise their hands up, it's like they don't need to
Yeah.
do that. That has nothing to do with the making of the sound. But at the same
Right, right.
time, it's like integral because
Part of
like exactly. And it's like music is choreography. Like I mean, really, it's choreography. And music is a sport. Like, everybody's like, people don't understand this when you're like, music is a sport. It's like, it really is. Like, you're putting the same intensity into training your limbs and your fingers to do the things
Mhm.
that's, an Olympic runner would do as they were running down the track.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of everything. There's a lot of
Exactly.
everything. You know, like yeah, people who are competing on something like the Olympic level or any like those kind of one person sports kind of things, you know, and or even teams, you know, you have to go through an intense training camp leading up to the event. And you know, as performers, we all know that exists. When you have a concert tour coming up, when you have anything coming up, it's going to be a significant amount of repertoire that you're going to have to perform every day nonstop for the next 3 weeks or longer, and you know, however long your tour is. There's a training camp, there's that like however many weeks beforehand that you're just making sure that everything is where you need it to be and you're in tip top shape, and it's going to be able to last you and you're going to be able to maintain it, you know. So
Yeah.
you're right that we do have that intense thing, and
Yeah. It's
people
like,
don't necessarily talk about it, but
yeah,
it's
it's not spoken about. I think people need to talk about it more, you know?
Mhm.
Like, and on one hand, that'll shed light on the fact that, there are all these problems that are associated with being a musician that nobody really talks about, but also it would show you the beauty and the intensity that actually goes, because there's people just assume being a musician is so easy. You just step onto stage and you perform. It's like they don't
Yeah,
realize that like that performance is like 10,000 hours in the making,
yeah, exactly.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. And it
You know?
all comes out like everybody can tell somehow the level, like even someone who's not a musician
Yeah.
can tell the difference between someone who is a concert pianist and someone who's an amateur easily, right? And you can nuance it further. They can tell the difference between someone who didn't practice as much and is going to have a little memory slip in the middle, and someone who's super confident and super poised and is never
Yeah.
missing a single thing, you know. So even if they don't know anything about music, everybody is able to sense like your level of preparation. And you know, when someone leaves a concert happy, it's because they're happy with your sense.
Hello? Hello? Hey man, I think that was on my end.
Yeah,
Sorry, my apologies for that. Um, Mom, is the internet off?
I think we're back. I think we're back
Yeah,
now.
yeah, no, I think we're back. I think we are back. Anyway, I switched my Wi-Fi connection, so
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
now I'm piggybacking on the neighbor's internet connection because these are the third world problems. It's like your own Wi-Fi connection isn't good enough, so you have to use your neighbor's.
Right, right,
But
exactly.
but then really, is that even a third world problem? Like there's so many Canadians who like live, they have apartments over cafes and they're always stealing the cafe's Wi-Fi.
Right, exactly. Definitely.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, now we're back. I think we're back properly. Um, yeah. Anyway, you were saying something and when it got cut, and I don't remember what you were saying.
Me neither, honestly. Oh yeah, I kind of forgot.
Yeah, no, we were talking about like how people can differentiate between someone who's a concert pianist and like
Right,
an amateur, and like if somebody's practiced or not practiced and all of that stuff.
exactly. Yeah, I was just saying that the audience is, even an untrained audience is aware of your level of preparation. And that's why people who prepare a lot and practice a lot of hours every day and do those intensive training camps before a performance are appreciated the most, because
Yeah,
everybody can still tell. You
yeah,
know, a lot of people think, you know, people can't tell, but people know exactly how much preparation you do every
yeah.
time.
Right, right. And I mean, I quip that I never practice, I only play. But like, let's be real, even when I'm playing, like I mean, I refer to everything that I do as my practice. Like
Mm-hmm.
literally and like in all the ways that, practice means, what you do, whatever. But like I say, like this is my practice. But then I like to joke that, oh, I never practice, I only play. So like, see
Right.
what I mean? There's another paradox, and it's like,
You could say the opposite too. You could say you never play, you only practice.
exactly, exactly. I should probably do that. Like I've said the first part enough. Now I should just
Right.
switch, and like all the people that I said that to are gonna be like, "What is wrong with this guy? Like he can't make up his mind. He doesn't even know what he's doing."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Listen, man, it's been incredible to have this conversation. Like I've like enjoyed every moment of it, and I'm so happy that we got a chance to connect like this.
Me
And
too.
once COVID's over, man, we gotta do a jam session with like
Yeah,
hyena sounds and bird sounds and lion roars and like all kinds of like we can have a symphony of animals.
yeah. It sounds great. Sounds fun. Yeah, it was really great. Yeah, talking to you. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a really great discussion.
yeah.
I was happy. Yeah, I was looking forward to it. Now I'm happy we had it, because that was great.
Thanks, man. Okay, so I'll let you know once it's uploaded. I'll send you the link.
Oh, great. Thanks, man.
Okay,
All
cheers.
right. Cheers.
Bye.